Welcome to another episode of Gender in Focus. I'm Elle. I'm here with Kai Scott, as always. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing so well. Although, is it rainy where you are? I can't see in the background.
Oh yeah. It's like, am I in Vancouver?
Right. It's giving UK. Love that. It's
Uh-huh.
giving, rainy day in London, which I'm here for. But it's so dark.
Hmm.
So I'm not loving that because I could do with some sunshine, but all good.
Right.
Today we are talking about photos. There are so many things to consider when we're talking about trans and non-binary inclusion or the things that trans people face in the world that can feel really big and really heavy. And I think it's probably quite easy to forget about the more everyday stuff. And I think photos can be a really big part of that for some people. But for trans people in particular, if we're looking at past photos, then this can be really difficult to manage. And so I was wondering if I could start, Kai, with just going into that a little bit, like when somebody comes out as trans or non-binary, what is it about photos in particular from before transitioning that becomes something that people around them or the trans people themselves just need to think about differently?
Yeah. It's such a good introduction to this often overlooked or maybe not even known about issue. Obviously known among trans and non-binary folks because
Right.
we're living it. But for
Mhm.
those who are around them, it may not register as a thing. And what do we mean by this issue? For some trans and non-binary folks, they change their appearance either in small or big ways. If they undertake gender affirming care, they may have some forms of surgery, or hormones can also really change the composition of one's body, how fat is distributed, even in the face. If we're just looking at the face, but also other aspects of one's bodies. And so, flat chest or curved chest, right? Things like that are apparent in the everyday. And that can really impact how people show up in photos. And if somebody is further along in their being trans or visibly trans, out as trans, that can play a bit of a tricky role in how they approach photos, especially of them in the past. Everybody has their thing, whether it's something that might be a little bit interesting, or if it's something they totally avoid. It it really depends on the individual, but there is a little bit of extra. I wouldn't say work, but it is in people's experiences and is an active part of either if they're considering past photos or if they're showing them to other, depends, but yeah, that's some of the dynamic at play with photos.
Fair. What are the different reactions that trans and non-binary people might have, or like the ways that they might feel when they see past photos of themselves, given that there is all of this context that you've just explained?
Yeah. So the it's quite a range actually, from folks who are either extremely or somewhat uncomfortable or even distressed by seeing past photos. And sometimes people think of that as a bit odd, but especially if the change in appearance has been quite drastic, then
Right.
to see someone's past image, or one's own past image, it can be kind of disconcerting and even maybe confusing, or just like it. There's no connecting to it because one wasn't living as one's full self at that time, and it's
Right.
a very painful reminder to see that for some folks. It could be maybe not uncomfortable, but a bit more private for some folks if we think of this reaction spectrum that we're talking about. So maybe a little bit more safeguarding who sees past photos and for what reasons and why, and all that. So they're a little bit more cautious. Some people are amused and like to show their past photo to others. Maybe not everyone, but maybe.
Right.
Some people put it on social media, right? So they can be quite visible with that information. A very favorite thing is doing it before and after, so people can see the contrast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be amusing to some people, to some trans and non-binary folks, for people to react to that contrast between the two images. There can be people who are excited about it, right? They kind of celebrate before, but they also celebrate after, and aren't uncomfortable by that difference,
Mm-hmm.
and are, accepting of both versions of themselves, and or the range of different appearances over time. And so, yeah, just give you a sense of, as the listener, that there is a range. There isn't just one single trans and non-binary response to seeing a past
Mm-hmm.
image. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And if you are with somebody, to understand where they might fall along that spectrum.
Going on from what you just said about how some people have different reactions to seeing those photos, and that it's
Mm,
not just one reaction for all trans people, I kind of wanted you to go into how important it is to not make those assumptions,
mm,
that like every trans person wants every single photo hidden or deleted, or
mm,
simultaneously every single trans person is delighted to see before and after photos of themselves. Like, I
mm,
want to talk about assumptions.
mm. Yeah, so I think people kind of go into in one frame of mind or another if they're encountering a trans or non-binary person who might have photos that they have access to or could possibly see. And so they're either treating it one of different ways. They're kind of preempting something, a stance on it, either
Mm-hmm.
thinking it's going to be extremely private, and this person will be really upset by seeing a past photo, versus thinking that they should be really excited about past photos, or accepting that people want to continue to display them or interact with them or reference them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually, there can be people at those extremes, but it's not everyone. And I think the better posture to have is to allow to understand where that person's coming from, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how they want past photos handled. And it can often be this, like, rather than making assumptions about one way or another, is to have a conversation that can be really beautiful and interesting, and a way to connect rather than to disconnect over misunderstanding,
Mm-hmm.
or assumption that might not be correct for that person. And
Mm-hmm.
you can have a conversation with, thoughtful questions like, how would you like how would do you interact, or would you like to interact with past photos of yourself? Here's
Mm-hmm.
how I feel about past photos of myself, right? Because sometimes we think this is the exclusive domain of trans and non-binary folks, but you
Mm-hmm.
know plenty of non-trans folks, don't, maybe aren't as comfortable with past images of themselves as well, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so getting into a conversation on equal footing then opens up that understanding between the two of you, and you can then figure out a way forward.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about different ways that photos show up, and one that I find quite in fact, we've had a conversation about how difficult this can be,
Mm,
is digital platforms and the way that that can complicate things. So, for
mm,
example, Facebook memories or on this day,
mm,
like when we see those. And I wanted you to go into that if you could.
Yeah. So you're right that there's kind of two different formats in which this can come up. Physical photos are one of those, and that's kind of what we've been talking about. But certainly, digital photos are way more prolific, really. I mean,
Mm.
very few people print off photos anymore, although maybe it's just me. But they're ever present online, right? If you think about Instagram, Facebook, um,
Mm.
LinkedIn, on and on, right? That,
Hmm.
and I would say especially Facebook has this feature that maybe others have seen it and encountered it, but this, like, Facebook Memories is a bit bananas for trans and non-binary folks,
I can
because
imagine.
you show past images just at random, right?
Mm-hmm.
from years ago, right? So I'll get served up, stuff before transition, I don't know, 13 years ago. And I'm like, oh, wow, I haven't, thought about, looked at this image of
Mm.
me in eons, and I look very different from when I did before. And it shows parts of my journey that were really painful in
Right.
terms of me trying to figure out where to locate how I appear to others. And
Mm.
I went through some bumpy stuff to get there, right? Like I have very feminine presenting photos out there of me.
Mm.
And sure, I could go through my Facebook photos and archive or delete all of that, but that's a huge effort, right?
Yeah.
If you think
Yeah.
about how many years people have been on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it just presents a huge challenge. And I'm sure if I could do some research, maybe I could turn off the Facebook memories thing, right? So there's ways to
Sure.
handle it, but it illustrates the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of seeing past photos and usually suddenly without being prepared, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then it can be disconcerting.
It can really, like, I again have been around somebody who in front of me had this happen. It sort of
Mm,
popped up on their Facebook, and it totally knocked their day. Like
mm,
it just sort of, not in a big way, but just
mm,
it just sort of knocked it out of place a little bit, and you could feel that they were off for the whole day, and
yeah.
it's just, it can be really jarring. And in fact, they asked me to go through, because I knew them from before they
Mm,
transitioned. They didn't want to do it themselves, but they asked me to go through all of their photos and do
mm,
exactly what you just said, delete and archive them.
yeah.
And there are so many. I don't think we really think about, like, over the,
Mm,
like, because people use like Facebook for years and
mm,
years and years and years. There were photos from high school and
yeah.
even before that, and going through, and other people tagging you in photos of yourself that you didn't upload, and going through all of that, and there was like, there were hundreds and hundreds of photos, and it's
Yeah.
so much work. And if you're already feeling sensitive about it, being confronted with hundreds of photos of yourself,
Mm,
if you are going to go through and delete and archive them, it's
yeah.
horrible. It's a horrible thing to have to
Mm,
deal with. And yeah, God, I wish that didn't exist. I wish that Facebook memories thing didn't exist. And it's so true. You were saying about how it's not just trans people that
yeah.
handle this. Again, have been in situations where I've seen photos of, friends that have passed away or something that just pop up, and it's
Mm,
suddenly very shocking. And for the most part, for most people on an everyday basis, probably isn't going to have something too much. But like for those really
mm.
sensitive things, it would be really nice to not have that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And without any frame of reference, like Facebook is pulling these at random. And we don't
Mm.
need to kind of pile on to this feature, but just, yeah, or like problem solve it here, do a strategy
Hmm.
session on how to improve it. But yeah, it just, yeah, it does, it's kind of offbeat.
Hmm.
And maybe in some instances create some like, oh, yeah, remember back in that day, but not for everyone.
No, for sure. What is the best way? Okay, I realize probably isn't the best way to handle this, but
Mm,
if somebody comes across an old photo of a trans or non-binary person
mm,
before they transitioned by accident, what
mm,
would you say is the ideal way to respond in that?
mm, mm.
Given that you might not know how they're feeling about it.
Yeah, this is a really important question because it can happen, right? I mean, sometimes people go back, they'll get to know somebody and they'll connect on
Hmm.
Facebook or Instagram, and they'll they'll likely go back, right, and kind of see the evolution of this person and
Hmm.
encounter these photos, even if they know somebody is trans. It's information about them that maybe they weren't ready or hadn't thought about sharing just
Hmm.
yet. And in that instance, if it's accidental and you haven't kind of got a sense of where they're at, is definitely not to mention it. Like it's just, I kind of jokingly say, activate the Men in Black memory erase and just not have it there, right?
Hmm.
I think why that's so important is because we're a very visual society, um,
Hmm.
and our brains can often anchor into the visuals and seeing somebody's past image can sometimes, for some people, influence how they use pronouns, right? And
Right.
so it's not to say it's a bad thing. Like, of course, photos are everywhere and it's not
Mhm.
somebody's fault, or they're not bad or anything like that. It's more just noticing if it's starting to impact things.
Mm.
Because I have had people look at past images of me and then start to use she, her pronouns for me. Like, it's bananas, right? Images are very powerful. And so that's where, if you like, you need to work with it. Obviously, things come up and whatnot, but it,
Yeah.
it's important not to reference and be like, I saw a past image of you. I couldn't believe how, much of a difference it is, and go on,
Mm.
because you don't know where that person's at. And then also notice how it impacts you as well in terms of how you
Mm.
refer to or see that person going forward.
Oh my gosh, that's so wild.
I know.
And I can imagine that though, that having sort of an image in your head will conjure like a whole different way of how you're seeing somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
How would that extend if you're seeing it in person? Because you're talking about Facebook or,
Hmm.
social media, whatever. But if you are, I don't know, walking into someone's family home and they have an old photo on the wall
Right.
of somebody and you're with the trans person right now and there's
hmm
a very obvious uncomfortable situation occurring, how would somebody handle that?
Yeah, I think there too, it's one thing if the trans person is showing it to you. That's
Mm-hmm.
very different reality than from if you're kind of passing by it and catch a glimpse of it, or even another family member is wanting to highlight it, and you can see perhaps
Yes.
that the trans person is uncomfortable, right? And in that case, it is important not to point it out, right? To be like, holy crap, is that you? And want to go on about that. Although I will
Sorry,
say,
that's not funny.
I mean, it is and it isn't, right? It's like,
Just because I can see that happening.
oh, totally. Well, this is the thing. It catches people off guard, and then they are kind of in an autopilot where they just react.
Right.
Whatever they think comes immediately out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, it's not a bad thing. People aren't bad for it, right? But
Right.
as much as you can kind of slow down that immediate impulse, so much the better, because you either don't know where the trans person's at, or perhaps that they're deeply uncomfortable with past
Mm-hmm.
images. And it's actually better to handle more on the conservative side, little c conservative, of like not making a big moment of it, right? Especially in front of other people. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and if it's something important, then the trans person will make the effort to point that out, right, to you.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not making that effort, you can just kind of waltz on by, and not make a big moment of it, and also not pay so much attention to be like study the image and absorb all of its details. It's like it's an artifact of the past, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be left in the past as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
these are just some of the tips. And then, of course, if the trans person wants to talk about it, obviously you can, listen and be a part of that conversation. But it's really taking the clue or the cues from the trans person. Now, I will say that not all images people might not recognize. So I have one past image of myself in my own place, and most people don't recognize me in it at all because of the great difference in appearance. Um, and so it's not anything. Now, I do point it out, and I have a little bit that I enjoy doing, of where it's my sister's wedding and I'm in a dress, and I point it out and I say, look, my sister forced me to dress in drag, She doesn't
And
like that bit.
she loves that. Yeah.
She hates it because she's like, I didn't force you. But I was like, you know what? You got to give me the simple joys that I can get from being trans, because there's a lot that isn't so fun. So, yeah.
That's great. Actually, I really want to go into that a little bit more about
Mm.
what changes when a trans or non-binary person chooses to show you an image
Mm.
of yourself, because then you don't need to tiptoe around it quite so much if that's
No.
how you're feeling.
Mhm.
It's a different thing. It's a different perspective. And the same you mentioned as well with some people who are sharing online the before and after photos. Like some people don't feel so heavily about past images.
Yeah. And in that case, it's again about kind of matching with their vibe, right? So if they're having a good chuckle, it's okay to laugh, right? I think people are a bit hesitant to be like, holy crap, this, for some is upsetting, but for this person, they're kind of nonchalant about it. And so
Mm-hmm.
if somebody didn't laugh at my joke, I feel kind of sad about it. With my bit, right? So it's okay to laugh. Obviously, if it's not funny to you, you don't have to laugh. But um, and in which case, I think it's just meeting people where they're at, or they're kind of like a little bit giddy or excited about sharing. Like, look how much I've changed. To be like, holy crap, that's really exciting. I'm excited
Mm-hmm.
for you, right? So there's ways that we can be with that person in either being silly or enjoying that moment too, right? We don't have to be kind of walking on eggshells or treating these people with kid gloves, right? Like
Right.
we can be with them. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
those are just some of the considerations around that. But it
Mm-hmm.
does require being attuned, and I think sometimes people are not as familiar with being attuned to trans and non-binary folks to see where they're at along that
Mm-hmm.
spectrum, because then you're if you're not attuned, you can't align, right? But if you are
Mm-hmm.
attuned, it does make a huge difference.
Sometimes cis people might specifically ask to see
Mm.
photos from before someone came out.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk about that and
Mm.
like how that can, well, yeah,
What's
basically.
involved?
Yeah. What's happening here?
Yeah. So, especially if you don't know where somebody falls along that response spectrum, it's really important not to ask. I think there's an opportunity for self reflection of like, why do I want to know, or why do I want to see this past image? Am I accounting for how somebody might respond? And they could be distressed by sharing or having to
Mm-hmm.
even be asked to share, and
Mm-hmm.
put in this bit of a pickle of like, do I share? Do I not? There's emotional labor and thinking that through. And really, not much is gained from seeing somebody's past image. Like, sure, there's a
Mm-hmm.
contrast, and sometimes people want to share that contrast, and it's exciting to them, and we could say, "Wow," but I feel like people think that they'll get some sort of clarity out of it,
Mm.
that is likely not there in the image. It's more in the storytelling where perhaps clarification, if somebody wants to tell their story, could be
Mm.
gained, but not in the image. I think people think
Right.
something will be resolved in all of that, and it's not. And sometimes people think they have to perform being an ally, by looking at an image and going wow, um, and especially there's common phrases of like,
Mm.
people will look at an image and be like, wow, now you look so much like a man, as an example.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
the like is doing a lot of heavy lifting in here, because
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, even if it's meant as a compliment, it's experienced as you're not actually a man. You're only
Mm-hmm.
like a man, right? By changing your image or whatnot. So, or they'll say things like, say somebody has long hair. Wow, you're even though you have long hair, so they have to like caveat, there's
Mm.
and you still look like a man, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's all these weird things that can happen when images are shown that set us back, from
Mm.
wanting to connect deeper with trans and non-binary folks. So yeah, so it's a little bit more complicated, and I would steer people away from asking for images. If images are shown by the trans person, that's a different dynamic than if you,
Mm-hmm.
as a cis person, ask for them.
Mm-hmm. I do, yeah. I really want to go into that again, like the comments that you should not say if you do see a photo, because you just gave such a good example, and I'm
Oh,
sure I'm sure so many trans people have experienced something like this, where
Mm.
it's like, oh, I would never have known. I would never have
Mm.
known
Mm. Oh my gosh, that's so painful.
or whoa, you were so beautiful before, or
Mm.
like making comments like that, which is sort of, I think, an attempt to be kind, but
Mhm.
is actually like the complete opposite of kind. And so
Mhm.
I was wondering if you could go into like that dynamic and what the compliments people give are
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah. They're trying to kind of wrestle with the images that either they're being shown or they've asked to be shown, and stuff can come out and that perhaps they haven't fully thought of,
Mm.
or thought through and don't realize are actually people don't enjoy that experience of receiving them, even if they're intended positively, which
Mhm.
mostly they are. Like people are
Yeah,
really
of
trying to
course.
say, I would never know, like, why, what's so problematic about that? It's this kind of, with that comment, there's the underlying assumption that we ought to know, that this is, about kind of appearances and the differences between them, and being able to tell and to figure it out and kind of crack this code. And, trans people aren't codes. We might do coding, but we're not codes. I know. Dad joke,
Trans
dad
people
joke.
are nerds, but they're not. Right.
Totally.
They're not a
Uh-huh.
code.
So this is the really important thing, that it's not about kind of figuring something out, that somebody doesn't want to show or something like that. It's a very odd comment. It comes up a lot. I've heard this hundreds of times,
Mm.
hundreds, and it's very annoying and, yeah, not helpful.
No.
What was the other one? I can't remember the other one that you just did.
Oh, there was some that I've heard a lot for other people is, oh, you were so beautiful before, or
Mhm.
even actually there's that one, and then there's also, wow, you look so beautiful now, which I
Right.
can also imagine being
For
pretty
the
grim.
trans femme folk, they're like
Yeah.
rolling, their eyes are rolling back.
Right.
So I'll take that in two directions, because beauty being at the center of it, but experienced by trans masculine versus trans femme folk very differently. So the
Hmm.
trans femme folks get that when they're coming out, and and coming into their own, and people, they either share or whatever, somebody finds out and they're like, oh, you're so beautiful for a trans woman, or trans feminine person. And it's like, the underlying assumption is people were surprised that somebody, a trans woman, could be beautiful, number one,
Right. Yeah.
which there are plenty, obviously, um, that they have to be feminine to be accepted as the women that they already are, and that we're even talking about somebody's looks tied to their gender identity, yeah, is deeply problematic, and one where they have to figure out how to respond without
Hmm.
taking on all of this stuff that has been said in that statement. The other way might be a little bit less visible of, uh, wow, you used to be so beautiful. I got that, to the point where I actually had several people say that you can't possibly transition because you're too beautiful. And that tells you, like, how much we've intertwined, that you have to be a particular way and you're not allowed to change, and it really messes with you when you kind of
Mm.
experience where you're just like trying to be there are people trying to be positive, but it kind of goes sideways, and really it's not relevant. And
Hmm.
also, what people don't realize is it's deeply painful for many, including myself, to have tried and it didn't fit, and then people
Mm.
want you to stay there.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's really, really, really difficult to hear. And where people are trying to celebrate, but they're missing the point. The point is
Hmm.
right in front of them and they can't see it, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Ugh. Ew.
I know. Ugh, femininity, who knew?
Mm. um, I want to ask a little bit about how families and friends and partners and other people who have trans people in their lives, you've talked about what they shouldn't be saying, obviously, but what about what they should be doing in terms of having photos? If they've got old photos on display in their house, or if they've got old photos of this person on their own Facebook that they've uploaded, like how can people handle photos that are kind of displayed in shared spaces?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and one that is good to bring up with the trans and non-binary person. Obviously, not the second they come out, right? To be like, what are your names and name and pronouns, and what do you want me to do with photos? Like.
In fact, here's a list of things I'd like to think about.
No, but this is something that if somebody comes out to you, can be a discussion point at some point where they've kind of figured out, settled into, and taking steps or whatever they're doing to be more fully themselves, is to loop back to them and say, hey, I mean, I have photos of you in my home, or I have photos of you on Facebook, and we have a shared history. I am open to all different avenues of how to deal with this. Here are a few that I've thought of, right? Creating a subfolder, just for the two of us, or whatever the case may be, just to kind of like brainstorm with the person. Perhaps they already have a clear sense of what they want to do, and they're like, on my Instagram, I did X, Y, and Z. I would like you to do the same. Or they would enjoy this co-creative process of being like, oh yeah, this option A feels better for me than options B and C, and let's try it out for 3 months, and so you can kind of be with that person in that, rather than what tends to happen is, one, most people don't discuss it with trans and non-binary folks. They just assume one way or another. Either they take away all their photos, or they leave them all up and haven't even thought about it. Right. Or they kind of get stuck in the past and be like, I want to keep the photos because I was happy during that time, and I don't know about you, but this is about me. But for the dialogue to happen, we'll surface that consideration, and you can create something that both of you can feel good about, right?
I kind of want to switch into work mode a second about how workplaces can handle things when this comes up, and it likely will come up when it comes to things like photos, ID badges, stuff. What's it called? Staff directories, even like website, like having someone's bio on the website, things like that, or like even what else? Like event images. How can workplaces handle that, or what should workplaces be thinking about when something like this comes up?
Yes, this is really important, especially if somebody is wanting or going to undertake some aspect of changing their appearance, right? What kinds of clothing they wear, what if they're going to take gender affirming care of any sort, they will likely look different over time. It won't be immediate. Like people aren't going to leave on Friday and then come in looking super different. Maybe clothing wise, yes, but not body wise. So this is where it's important for organizations to be ready. So if somebody comes out at work, there's a set of steps. We talk about this in other podcast episodes, so I won't go through all the steps, but some of them are related to ID badge. We have a whole checklist, and IDs being one of them, because, or like you said, bio on the webpage, so many different places where images show up, and to kind of do a scan of those, an inventory of where all this person's image comes up, and then to plan with them, like, what would you like us to do? When would you like to change your photo, if necessary, right? We don't always assume that everybody's changing how they look, right? Because some people don't change at all, and that's perfectly valid. But for those who do, then you have to think about the timing. So for some, especially if they're taking if they're undergoing some form of gender affirming care, that typically tends to take about 6 months to a year, maybe longer, for those to be visible in ways that impact images. So it might not be immediately when somebody comes out. It might be a year down the road where you say, okay, now I would like my image updated. And it's important to have set up a process that doesn't require lots of hoop jumping and certainly not cost to do that. So just setting that up in a thoughtful way is very important. Another aspect is human resources might request ID, government issued ID to determine citizenship or, whatever else. In which case that ID might have a different looking image, right? So it might not be a coming out process. It might be this person is already out as trans, maybe even hasn't shared at work that they're trans. And now you're seeing a past image of them. Perhaps it takes a lot to update IDs, and you might even see a past name, past gender marker, all these things. And so this is where it's really important to have, to one, be ready for that to be the case and not to be surprised or not to claim fraud or, whatever thing that people do. And really to work with that individual to process them. So you might still have to document their legal name, but you use their chosen name in interactions and accept them for how they look now, even though you've seen a past image of them.
What would you want cis people, families, friends, partners, workplaces to remember before they're commenting on anything, displaying anything, sharing anything when it comes to photos of trans and non-binary people? Just to end the episode.
Yeah, I think it's just being a bit more thoughtful in that process rather than just kind of bull in China shop, steam forward in one way or another. It's just an opportunity to check in, to see where somebody is at, to work with them, with the trans or non-binary person, whether at work or in their personal lives. But I think also there's something to be said about connecting it to one's own experience. Perhaps there's images that you're not really comfortable if you're a cisgender person, that you don't want kind of widely known or distributed. And so just having that as an anchoring point will help you possibly understand what might be going on for a trans or non-binary person, especially if they're not feeling very comfortable or even a bit distressed with past images. It's not this kind of mystery as to why. It's because sometimes we're just not comfortable with certain things being out there, and working with each other to help with that in whatever way that looks like. So hopefully that just gives people an opportunity to be better connected on this topic in particular.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kai.
Thank you too.
We'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.